Hello and welcome to another edition of For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. As you can see, we are out on the road today. We're at the Denison Pequotsepos Nature Center, and I am here with the Executive Director, Maggie Jones is her name. That was more difficult to say than the name of the place. It's her second time being on the show, but this time we decided to go to her house, which is this house, which is much more beautiful than ours. Thank you for allowing us in.
It's a great pleasure to have you here, and what a beautiful day and my favorite season.
Yeah, not in, out. We're out at your place. For those that aren't familiar with it, tell us what the Denison Pequotsepos Nature Center is.
Well, that could take a full hour. The Denison Pequotsepos Nature Center is a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but essentially we are an environmental education center. We're a nature sanctuary. We're located here on Pequotsepos Road in Mystic, and we encompass close to 300 acres of interconnected open space. Some is owned by us, some is owned by the Denison Society. They are our landlords. Some is owned by the Avalonia Land Conservancy, and it's all interconnected through about 10 miles of trails.
Wow.
And as of just a few months ago, we are now the proud owners of the Coogan Farm, which extends our nature preserve all the way to the Mystic River.
Wow.
So it's really a beautiful spot, incredibly diverse habitats and trails through those habitats. And our real mission is to get people excited about nature. And we do that through science programs and all kinds of activities for children and adults, and cradle to grave.
So it's actually expanding. Whenever adjacent land becomes available in some capacity, you maybe express an interest in wanting to be involved, whether it be you or the Denison?
No, this is really the first time that we've taken upon ourselves to have a real campaign to raise funds to purchase a property.
Did you feel it was necessary?
It was, in this case, it was necessary. Okay. We explored various options, and it became clear fairly early on that if we didn't purchase this property to create a park, nobody else was going to do it.
It would be some sort of a plaza with shops or something.
Exactly.
Instead,
it would have been a Sheraton Hotel and Convention Center and various fast food joints and things like that right at the gateway to Mystic.
We don't need that. Mystic is touristy enough. Why not have this for people to appreciate
well,
as well?
I think it's a balancing act, and I think a place like this is really the reason many people love Mystic, and it's where the country and the coast meet. And we epitomize that. It's the Coogan Farm especially is sort of the backdrop to the Mystic Seaport. And when you're on the Mystic Bridge and you're looking up the river and say, oh my gosh, Mystic is the most beautiful town in the world, that's why, because it's not completely built up. So I think our goal was to strike a balance and to protect the integrity of the Nature Center, which the Coogan Farm does.
Talk about Denison a little bit and how that all ties in.
Sure. So the Denison family has owned the land that we sit on and the adjacent land around us since the 1600s. Captain George Denison was one of the first settlers of this area, and the land has been in their family ever since. And back in the 40s, they decided that a nature center would be a good fit for part of their property, and so we've been here since that time.
Wow.
And they've been good landlords. We have a great relationship with them. They lease the land on a long-term basis to us for $1 a year.
For those who don't understand why is a preserve necessary? Why is a nature center necessary? Why do we need it?
Well, there are lots of different answers to that too. One is, I think, just for, humans are innately connected to nature, whether, not everybody recognizes that, but some of our most basic senses of sound and color and pattern all trace back to early childhood experiences in nature. So it's important to us just as living human beings. It's important to our health.
Yeah.
A healthy people depend on a healthy planet, and it's sort of this link that we just can't separate. It's important to the Nature Center and what we do in terms of environmental education, because this is our classroom. We're sitting in our classroom. All of southeastern Connecticut has wonderful places that we utilize as our classroom. So whether it's the land that we sit on, or the Coogan Farm, or Bluff Point, or Barn Island, or the Connecticut College Arboretum, or an Avalonia or a Groton Open Space Association property, those are all important outdoor classrooms where we can get other people excited about nature.
It's funny you should mention that, because we have done shows where about programs that would take kids from the inner cities, like maybe New York, and for a summer or so, they would take them to places like this to, you know, that some kids may not have even experienced trees, woods, grass, you know, if you're deep in the inner cities.
We know that
Yeah.
because many of them come here,
Yep.
and it's interesting. I've been here now for 22 years, and it really is incredible how so many kids now are so connected to their cell phones and you know, sort of
Technology.
electronics and technology, that it's hard for them to have an authentic experience. They don't know how to experience it, and so that's part of our role, is to kind of strip it down to, you know, the bare one-on-one kind of relationship that you can have when you're outside.
And I have to tell you something, not to get too metaphysical on you, but just sitting here as we were setting up, there's a different kind of energy, there's a different kind of vibe. In nature in general, birds will fly down right next to you because this
Went
is
to fly by.
this is their home.
Yeah.
We're in their home, in nature's home. And you know, when we first got here, we were looking at some owls, and the girl was with them, petting them, so they love you. There's a regular old house cat that's walking around here, probably part of the staff, right?
No, he's an interloper. He shouldn't be here.
Oh, okay, yeah. Too many birds here for him.
Too many birds here, and we prefer not to have cats wandering around. Every once in a while, one will show up. And,
He's an interloper.
but you bring up a point in that another, and I think probably the most important reason to preserve places like this is to protect our natural biological diversity. So here at a place like the Nature Center, where we are interconnected to a lot of other open space, we have a fairly significant amount of acreage that allows some of the ground nesting birds, for example, and some of the less common species of plants and animals to survive. You know, the things that you wouldn't find in an inner city park, for example, because it's just, you know, grass and tall trees and very little biological diversity. Here you have lots of different habitats that are interconnected. We have streams and bogs and ponds and rocky outcrops and meadows, and so we have a whole diversity of wildlife that depend on those types of habitats.
As we tape it, I know that this is one of your favorite times of the year, you know, spring weather time as we tape. So do things get more active now and then getting right into the summer and into the fall?
So, you mean in terms of our activities here at the Nature Center?
Activities and life in general?
Life in general, sure. I mean, if you think about just, you know, we were listening to an oriole that's flitting around in the tree right up there, and a scarlet tanager.
You know all the
some
birds,
others.
you know them by names.
I know them by name. There's a chipmunk calling, and of course an English sparrow, not my favorite. But, you know, about 60 to 80% of the birds that are here now have just returned to our forests. They go down to Central and South America for the winter. So indeed, the woods are much richer this time of year. And this has just been the most spectacular spring because the temperatures have been nice and cool for the last month or so. So when things bloom, everything's a little bit late, but it's staying out, it's lasting. It's just been spectacular.
What happens in the dead of winter here at a nature center or a preserve in general?
Well, lots of things are either hibernating or under a blanket of snow, or we have a whole new suite of birds
It's pretty,
that
I
come
would
down
imagine.
from the far north. But it's still, we're very active here during the winter time. We've got year-round programs here. So this is indeed our busiest time, because I'm not the only person that likes this time of year. So we've got lots of school groups that come and that sort of thing.
Well, let's talk about some of those programs since we are coming into the time, your favorite time. What is happening here? What can people experience here?
Well, we have all kinds of programs. We have a newsletter called the Chickadee Newsletter. We're a member-supported organization, I should say that. So if anyone's interested in becoming a member, we rely on the support of members to do the work that we do. You can find out about our programs on our website and all the things we do. In fact, we just recently launched a new website. It's got a few little glitches, but it's going. It's dpnc.org is our website. And this time of year, we have all kinds of things. We have regular hikes for adults that happen on Tuesdays and Saturdays. We do full moon walks for families every full moon. We have a bunch of different things coming up this summer where we're going to be doing some regular evening programs like firefly walks and things like that, just to take advantage of the sorts of things that are happening in a particular part of the season, maybe some stargazing programs and things like that. Perhaps the most popular thing coming up is our summer nature camp. And that starts in just a couple of weeks, I think the second week of June. And you can find out about that. It's ages 3 to 15. And there is something for everybody. We have half-day camps, we have full-day camps, we have some overnights, and lots of fun things to appeal to just about any kids' particular interests.
What does membership get you compared to just a general admission, like for a day?
So I think membership at the Nature Center is a real bargain. A family membership is $50, and you can come here with your family as often as you like. And the beauty of nature is that it's never the same place twice. I mean, you come here today and you'll see some birds that if you come here next week, you might not see, or you might see, you know, a little owlet sitting in a tree, or a fox might run across the path. I mean, it's just that's part of the fun of being out in nature. You also get special member rates on our programs and on the summer camp. You get a discount in our store. So the Nature Center membership has a whole array of benefits.
Well, we'll take a break because we got a lot more to get to when we come back. So I'll have you give out the website one more time for people to go and check out.
Okay,
What is it?
It's dpnc.org.
All right. Maggie Jones is the Executive Director of the Denison Pequotsepos Nature Center. We will take a short break and come back. I'm Sean Murphy. This is For the Record. Stay with us. Welcome back to For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. We are here at the Denison Pequotsepos Nature Center in Mystic. Executive Director Maggie Jones is with us. She's been on the show before, but this is the first time we're at her place, outdoors here at the Nature Center. It's beautiful, by the way, too. Beautiful time of year, but a lot more to talk about. One thing, when you mention Nature Center, sometimes people immediately think of, well, it's for the kids. It's for the kids. And it's true that it's very educational, and you have field trips here during school season, but it's not just for the kids, is it?
It absolutely isn't, and as our demographic changes here in southeastern Connecticut, we're making sure that we offer lots of programs for adults. We have a walking series that's called Trails to Ales, and we do this usually once a month, where we'll take a hike somewhere and we move it around to different towns, and then we'll visit a local brewery or brew pub or winery. And that's been a very popular program, and again, a great way to get people outside enjoying nature, and then get a little bit of R&R afterwards, and it's a fun way to socialize. Our hiking program has been very popular. We do photography programs, and this weekend I know we have something coming up on bees. We've had a regular winter series on beekeeping. That's a very popular adult educational series. So we really have been making a real effort to do more adult programs.
You know, earlier in the show, you were talking about kids, and sometimes they're just connected to their cell phones and games and stuff like that. When you think of nature center, outdoors, and these kinds of activities, you think of activity, you think of physical activity. You're doing a little moving, maybe a little hiking, a little walking, but you're somewhat active, a lot more so than you would be just parked in front of the TV, that's for sure.
That's for sure. Some activities are maybe a little bit more laid back and sedentary than others. I mean, birding walks, usually we're moving slowly looking for birds, but we do kayak and canoe trips all summer long. That's a great way to get outside and learn some of our local waterways, and we have several coming up. You can find out about those if you go visit our website.
When you talk about these things to do, the kayaking out on the rivers and stuff like that, what is your role in the community, especially what you would want people to think of? Because you're so involved in just outside the borders of the Nature Center per se itself, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that really we like people to think of the Nature Center as sort of the source for information and on the environment, and we see ourselves as being influential in terms of sort of sustainability models and things like that, so that especially with the Coogan Farm, as we start to develop that more as a nature and heritage center, the whole idea of creating more sustainable tourism in Mystic, and sort of a model for healthy living and that sort of thing. I think there's all kinds of extended roles that the Nature Center will be playing as time goes on.
When we first got here, just to kind of scout the area to see what would be a good spot for us, the first thing that I happened to notice were a couple of owls. And I don't know if the owls or the hawk next to them was being rehabilitated, but you do a lot of rehabbing of animals here.
We do. While it's not our major role, it's something that we've done since we've been in existence, I have a permit that allows us to handle migratory birds and birds of prey, both for educational purposes and in order to rehabilitate them. So we get, I think last year we had over 125 different animals brought into us for rehabilitation, and if we can't take care of it here, we have a whole network of wildlife rehabilitators around the state that we work with. So we have right now about 11 different birds of prey that are permanent residents here, non-releasable, and those are education birds. We bring them into classrooms. I think you said you met with one of them when you first walked in. So these are birds that have permanent injuries that would not allow them to survive in the wild. We also have some turtles and snakes and lots of different native wildlife as part of our exhibits here, so that people, when they come to the Nature Center, can see what some of the different creatures are that inhabit southeastern Connecticut that they might actually encounter out here on the trails or elsewhere when they're outside. We also have, but you can't see them quite as easily, we have several birds that are patients right now that will ultimately be released to the wild, but they are kept separately from the birds that we have for our education programs.
Who do you have here on staff, expert-wise, that can really, during the rehab and can kind of expertly decide whether, you know, someone has to stay permanently or be released eventually? How does that work?
Well, usually it's a group decision that involves me, often a veterinarian, and we have a couple of very good staff members who have been doing this now for some time. Our animal care specialist here is Laura Craver, and she's a good generalist. She takes care of not only the hawks and owls, but the snakes and the turtles and the frogs.
You can't be afraid of anything.
You can't be afraid of everything, absolutely.
What's in the natural environment here, what would be like a dangerous predator, or if there is any?
Oh, I think the only thing I'd be nervous about is if there were, you know, a rabid raccoon. If you saw
right, and that's
an
a
animal,
medical issue. Yeah.
Well, that would be, you know, if you saw a raccoon or another mammal behaving strangely on the trail, I'd
stay
turn
away
around,
from it.
go the opposite direction.
But you don't have coyotes or?
Well, we do, but they're not
They're timid.
dangerous per se. Yeah.
Okay. Just kind of wondering, like, what's out here? Not like bears or anything like
Well,
that.
we have had bears, and
your land is vast.
Yeah, we've have had bears here within the last few years. Although we don't have any resident black bear, they're not far from us along the Connecticut-Rhode Island border. But we have a great array of different mammals. I mean, everything from fisher and bobcat and mink and weasels and squirrels and possums and raccoons and all the
Critters.
typical stuff, critters. And lots of different bird species. You see the chipmunk just went into the building.
He comes in and out.
Again, right?
He comes in and out when he wants.
So it's a big free-for-all here.
You mentioned people making a group decision about, whether to release or keep here. If someone was interested in this, as sort of a profession, or if wildlife was the love of their life, what should they study to bring them to a place like this in school? Are there certain majors that you could study?
Sure. Well, there's, that's a
veterinarian. I know that.
Well,
right?
You could be a veterinarian if your love is taking care of animals. There are so many different arms of biology and ecology and natural science, and some are much more hard science, the physical sciences, and it all kind of comes together here at the Nature Center. So our staff is very diverse in that respect. I'm the resident botanist and ornithologist, but other people have experience in sort of more general nature studies and that sort of thing.
If someone comes along and you say, we could use you, we could fill that vacancy. We would love to have this, in our group.
Sure, and we often get volunteers that come in and help feed the animals, or that are interested in getting a wildlife rehabilitator's permit. And sometimes they will work with us as volunteers and eventually go on to become wildlife rehabilitators in their own rights.
As executive director, what do your day-to-day duties consist of? Because I could imagine in this job, especially with the vastness of it, it's never the same.
It's never the same. I think that's what's kept me here for 22 years. It's very interesting. I mean, the sort of general administrative duties that one would expect from the executive director, but quite literally, you never know what's going to walk through the door.
You
So-
try not to be in the office as much as you would probably want to be outside, right?
Well, unfortunately, I end up being in the office a lot. There are a lot of meetings and you know, a lot of sort of fundraising and development sorts of things. But you know, grant writing.
Well, you're a nonprofit, so that's life, and you've been doing it for 22 years, right?
Doing it for a while, and but certainly being out in the field, it's important to me to stay connected with what's going on out in nature.
Since you've been doing it for 22 years, what's changed over the course of time? What's evolved? What's different about it now than it was when you first started, aside from your knowledge, you know?
You mean the job per se, or just?
Conservancy, nature preservation, the nature
Oh,
center
I
in
think
general.
there are lots of things that are different. We touched about it a little bit, just in terms of how children have become sort of more wired to
Too much
their
so, yeah.
phones and things, so that there's that disconnect. And just when you think that you're making a difference, something is countering that, and so you have to come at it from a different angle. But I think we've seen, you know, the landscape change pretty dramatically. So for the first time, just a few years ago, you know, Connecticut was becoming increasingly forested as old fields and farms grew back into forest. And
That's a good thing, right?
Which was an okay thing. I mean, we were losing that early successional habitat. Now what's happened is the pace of development is now outpacing the regrowth of our forests and things, so that we're actually losing habitat. And so that's one of the factors that has made it more important to really evaluate how we can protect areas that connect to already existing open spaces. And it's made places like Patchogue State Forest and Arcadia State Forest and the Nature Center and Bluff Point and, you know, some of the larger preserves all the more important.
You know, you mentioned how like kids and maybe people in general sometimes are a little bit too plugged into their technology, but at the same time, you can at the very least try to use that to your advantage a little bit. If that's where they are, if they're on social media,
Yeah,
you can be there too.
No
right?
question, there's a flip side to that.
Yeah.
So the Nature Center is very active on Facebook. I mentioned we have a new website, and people can ask us questions on Facebook. They send us pictures, and so we try to keep fairly active on our Facebook site.
Yeah, so wherever they are, you are. And I would imagine that just going to your website, there's probably a link to your social media so you can get to
Absolutely.
Facebook right from there. Tell people if they want to visit, now that they're very intrigued about it, times you're open, how much it costs to get in, those kinds of things.
Sure. So we're open year round. The only days we're actually closed are Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving, and sometimes Easter.
Sometimes.
But the grounds are open pretty much all the time, and we're open from 9 until 5, Monday through Saturday, Sundays 10 to 4, and there's always something going on here. The admission is, oh gosh, I think it's $8 for adults.
yep.
Yeah, and we have different sorts of discounts for seniors and military and that sort of thing.
All right, let's take one more break and come back, right back. I'm Sean Murphy. This is For the Record. Stay with us. Welcome back to For the Record. Sean Murphy here, and Maggie Jones is the Executive Director of the Denison Pequotsepos Nature Center. We are just about out of time, but I wanted to give you a second to just briefly talk about how your outreach programs and about how much you are involved in the schools.
Yeah, that's probably, I think, one of the most important things the Nature Center does. We are in just about every elementary school in New London County. We have programs in the New London schools. Twice a day in some cases. We reach about 50,000 people a year with our programs, and about 30,000 of those are school children. And so PTOs and schools that are interested in enhancing their science curriculum, we're the go-to place.
So it's not just them coming here, you can go to them too.
We go to them. In
the
fact, we do
classrooms.
that more than they come to us. And sometimes we take their groups to nature preserves or their own back schoolyards. So.
Sounds good. One more time on the website so people can learn everything and then come here for a visit.
Yeah, so the website is dpnc.org. It's the acronym for Denison Pequotsepos Nature Center.
All right. Maggie Jones, the Executive Director. This time, thank you for inviting us into your Nature Center. Appreciate it.
My great pleasure. Thanks for coming out, and thanks for bringing the good weather.
You are very welcome. That's our show for today. You can see this show and many others on our YouTube site. Until next time, I'm Sean Murphy. We'll see you.